Now back to Keeping It Real with the Reverend Al Sharpton. Only on NewsTalk 1090 AM WYLD Boston, where information is power.
Keeping it real. Keeping it real, keeping it real. I'm your host, Reverend Al Sharpton, and we're talking about keeping it real. Professor Eddie Glaude of Princeton wrote an essay, "The Black Church is Dead," and he's on the line. He's, in fact, staying an extra segment to respond to Reverend Rivers is with us from the Church of God in Christ, and it's been a spirited discussion, I think a good one. At the National Action Network Convention, Reverend Garrett Simpson and others will be discussing this. I think it needs to be discussed. Go ahead, Professor Glaude. I had stopped you to let Reverend Rivers make his point. You respond.
Well, I want to say that I know that panel at the National Action Network Convention is going to be a powerhouse, because everyone you just described are exemplars of what I'm calling for. But I do want to say that, Reverend Rivers is absolutely right that the cross is about sacrifice. It's about risk. It's about daring. It's also the ultimate act of love. It's an enactment of love. And love, for me, is not some sentimental notion. Love is something that calls us, that crushes cowardice, and challenges hubris. And it is that act of sacrifice that is a deep enactment, a profound enactment of love that we need to exhibit in our own lives. So I don't disagree with him. I just want to extend it. But I do want to say this, that I'm just not, Reverend Rivers, I don't think I don't think I am a detached ivory tower intellectual. I may be, and I just might not know it. But I want to say that I'm deeply concerned by the most vulnerable in the world. And I think that African American churches play a central role, and I want them to do even more. That's what I'm calling for.
Reverend Rivers?
Very simply, to that end, Professor Glaude, I would encourage you to spend some time with Bishop Blake. The reason I suggest that is that he's doing an enormous amount of work. He's worked for the last 10 years without a lot of hoorah in Africa. He set up a Pan-African Children's Fund. He is working in 23 countries across the continent of Africa, very quietly. No showboat, no rah-rah. He's been working with Reverend Sharpton on a Haiti relief project. And I would suggest that academic intelligentsia, let me suggest you this last point. Far beneath the clouds of our celebrity academic intelligentsia, God bless them, great men who mean well, right? There is another world that exists. There are thousands of prophetic black Christians in storefronts that are doing major work across the United States and in Africa and the Caribbean. I would suggest, and I encourage this, if we are really about the cross and it's about the sacrifice, I would encourage Professor Glaude, Professor West, Professor Dyson to visit West Angeles, not simply to sell books, a speaking engagement, but to come and learn. I'd encourage Tavis, who's right up the street from Bishop Blake, to sit down and find out what's happening on the ground. We're visiting the favelas and the slums all across the continent of Africa. Now, not one celebrity academic intellectual in 10 years has called once to say, Bishop, what you're doing.
But now you want to be honest, or you want to admit that I've mentioned Bishop Blake in the piece.
No, I'll say that. You know what? Let me tell you something. I was really lit. I read the essay, and I said, Professor Glaude gets that right, part of it right. He gets it right, and props off to you, brother. But all I'm saying, if we're really going to be about what we say we're about, for real, then there needs to be a dialogue that's simply like I said, not trying to speak at West Angeles because it's a big church, and they'll sell a lot of your books. But to show up and say, Bishop Blake, we're prophetic, revolutionary intellectuals. My name is Cornel West, Eddie Glaude, Mike Dyson, Tavis Smiley. Is there some way that we support the work you're doing on the trenches? And so I'm simply making that moral appeal to you. If we're legit for real, and we're really about it for real, I should be studying Eddie Glaude. And if I'm working in the trenches, Eddie Glaude should say, from the terrain of struggle, adversity, I might visit some of the brothers in the bush, in the trenches, to develop a vertical dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that an acceptable moral challenge?
Absolutely, absolutely. But again, I would say, I can hear, I can hear the power, and in the challenge, in the question, in the invitation, and I'm certainly willing to do so. I think part of what I want folk to understand is that there's a long tradition of this sort of writing.
Sure.
I'm in it. It's aimed at producing the exact kind of conversation we're having. Reverend Sharpton hit the point dead on the head earlier, that the conditions of black life have changed dramatically, which require of us reimagining so many different facets of our lives.
Absolutely.
That also involves, Reverend Rivers, reimagining what we take ourselves to be doing in the academy. And so I'm with you. I'm with you. I cite Bishop Blake in some ways with my tongue in my cheek, because typically Kojic, right, is often viewed as otherworldly in the literature.
That's right.
Right, but here we are engaged in making the argument for the public option. Where's everybody else on the national?
And you cited that in the article.
Yeah, I sure did.
Yes, you did.
All right, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to let you go take care of Reverend Jeremiah Wright, Professor Glob, but I ain't going to let you go, Reverend Rivers. You're going to have to help fill some of these calls. You got my phones lit up. I don't know if they pro or con, but we're going to walk through them together. We'll be right back. Eddie Glob, you got to be with me next week. We're going to get you back. Keeping it real, keeping it real. I'm your host, Reverend Al Sharpton, Reverend Eugene Rivers of Church of God in Christ. Staying with us. Let's get some of the reaction of folks on the phones. 1-877-532-5797. Let's start in Chicago with Mike. Mike, you keeping it real with Al Sharpton.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Right.
What's up?
Hey, brother, I really commend you what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish, and I encourage you to continue to do the same thing. But what you got to realize is that when Jesus came, before he came, he was sending prophets to preach about the stuff that he was going to come and preach, to basically prepare the people and let them know that the condition and the direction that you're going in is not of my Father.
That's right.
And what happened was that they would kill the prophet. And then when Christ came, they did the exact same thing to them. Now, our religious leaders today has led the church in the condition that you're speaking of. That's not an opinion. That's a People don't lead themselves. Sheep don't lead themselves. They're being led by someone. So when you look at a body of people who are following someone else, the condition of that people, they're being led in that condition. What you're doing is preaching against those people. Those people who you're preaching against are going to come up against you the same way the scribes and Pharisees did against Christ. So the information that we have going on, or the piece that you wrote, they don't want to hear that. The brother who you had on the show, he don't want to hear that. A lot of our religious leaders who are preaching in the pulpit and on TV and Hollywood and stuff like that, they don't want to hear that because they're making a whole bunch of money off what is actually being going on. And the church today, the divorce rate is greater than it is in the church as it is in the world. You know, teen pregnancy, all this stuff that's going on in the world is going on in the church. It is better for you, and you would become much more successful even if you didn't go to church. There's a reason for that. This is not a game. The numbers are on our side. So what we must do is encourage those to come out of that mindset institution that is called church today, and then deal with Christ on a biblical level and honoring him as far as being obedient.
All right, let Reverend Rivers respond, Mike. Go ahead, Reverend.
Listen, brother, your last point about living the biblical life, that's what this is all about. Listen, the Bible says judgment will begin in the house of God. That's what the book says. That it's going to begin in the house of God. I completely agree with you. One of the things, just very quickly, we all must challenge the black church to do more, simply as an institution in the black community. So I'm saying you ain't got to be a Christian. You can just be a responsible member of the black community.
Right.
We, the churches, need to be challenged. I'm speaking as a pastor, right? We, the churches, need to be challenged to do more. Absolutely.
But let me say this, Mike and Reverend Rivers, and I alluded to it before.
Right.
My view is that I absolutely agree the black church needs to do more, but I think the black church always needed to do more.
Right.
See, where I take issue is there always was some prophetic voices in the black church.
That's right.
As even Professor Glad said,
Right.
Joseph Jackson National Baptist Convention was not with Dr. King. Dr. King stepped out and did that. In the Church of God in Christ, we had progressive ministers like Gilbert Patterson and
That's right.
F.D. Washington and Charles Blake, who was marching when other Kojic bishops was against that. And the same today. But I think that as we have these analyses, the same is true in the academic community.
That's right.
W.E.B. Du Bois didn't just write Souls of Black Folk. He helped found the NAACP and got on the ground and taught at Fisk University. We have a lot of academicians now that have nothing to do with a black organization, nothing to do with black institutions, that just want to sit around and criticize blacks that are doing something. So what I'm saying is that the connection has to be not only the black church, but black academia. There is no difference between a TV evangelist and a TV academician to me, when neither one of them are in the trenches doing anything.